Plants are essential. Plants are essential. Plants are essential to our survival as humans. Here in Hawaii are many outstanding organizations and individuals working diligently to protect and conserve our remaining native Hawaiian species. Let's meet one of these individuals.
Botanizing is a general term, but people who study plants and research plants go out in the field to find things. It's not just like stamp collecting. You don't just go out and put them in a press and put them in the museum, important as that is, but you study how they fit into the ecosystems that they're in, what parts they play in the whole.
Robert Warner Hobdy was born on the island of Oahu to Ruth and William Hobdy. Bob spent his early years in the Kailua district, where his family had a home at Mokapu. Young Bob attended Lanikai Elementary School prior to the family's move to Lanai. The Hobdy family roots extend back to the Kingdom of Hawaii era to Bob's grandfather, Dr. William Hobdy, who was the personal physician of Queen Lili'u o Kalani.
Ano la na I ke kauna o ko ka pa ula kau po ohibi e ola la na ia ka ulula au he aku ma ko e o mai o e ano la na I ke kauna o ko ka pa ula kau po ohibi e ola la na ia ka ulula au he aku ma ko e o mai o e aloha la na I.
We were all over this island. We didn't have televisions. We got involved with the Boy Scouts and a Little League and stuff like that, but for the most part we were just roaming around the mountains. I got interested in plants through my associations with Dr. Degner.
Otto and Isa Dechner were some of the most early advocates for Hawaii conservation. They created this flora. This is one of 6 volumes, and it's a listing of all the known Hawaiian species and all the different plant families. I mean, it's really an exhaustive work.
I came up here with the botanist Otto Degner and his wife Isa in I think it was 1957. It's an interesting area because it's all tall, straight kukui trees growing in the bottom. It's a narrow canyon. They have to grow straight up to get to the light. Walking up the canyon, noticed all of these trees had big scars in the trunks made by rocks that come rolling down off of the cliffs. And we were walking up the gulch bottom. Otto looks up and he spots this ko'olau plant, the Biden's, in flower about 40 feet up the side of the cliff. He goes, "Oh, I'd really like to get a specimen of that, but it's obviously too far up the cliff. There's no way we can get to it." Well, I was 15. I'd been climbing a lot of trees and going up and down gulches, and I told him, "I think I might be able to get to that." I got up about 30 feet up, but it was still about 10 feet from it when I got to a place that was just too steep and I couldn't get any further. And I looked down at the bottom of the cliff 30 feet down, and there was all these big boulders down there, and I was thinking, if I slip off of this thing, I'm gonna either kill myself or be, in the hospital. I sat back and I just looked out, and my eyes focused on a kukui tree. It was about 10 feet out from the edge of the cliff. That's the only possibility, but that's kind of far out there. It's a long jump, And finally, without saying anything to the Degners, I just leaped out from the cliff and grabbed onto this tree and whump into the tree, and I really kind of nailed my groin in the process, but I wasn't about to lose my grip on the tree. Otto Degner was just amazed. He says, "Wow, I never thought you would ever do something like that." But I survived, so that's why I'm here today.
Otto Degner moved to Hawaii in 1922 and spent over 60 years collecting a variety of plant species from Hawaii. His collections are the largest and finest Hawaiian Island specimens in existence.
In World War II, William Hillebrand's collections of Hawaiian plants, which were irreplaceable treasures, were destroyed in the war. And he said, "We must not ever let that happen again." I was a 15-year-old kid listening to this, and it was like, wow, this is amazing stuff. For me, it was like a point in my life where the boundaries of my world were being pushed back. It was a dramatic point in my life, and I learned from him this great enthusiasm for what he was doing, and it was a very exciting time.
Another great influence on Bob during his younger years was Lanai ranch manager, collector, and author George Monroe.
The manager of the Lanai Ranch, George Monroe, took an interest in plants and birds and everything native in Hawaii, and he collected a lot of plants, made a lot of important collections from Lanai that we have in the Bishop Museum today.
My father and I had been hunting for chukar in the lower Ka'a lands, east of Avalua. We found a shrub with red pea-like flowers that was unfamiliar to us. We collected a sample and at the earliest opportunity flew to Honolulu in my father's single-engine Stinson.
He was very gracious to identify it for us. It was a very interesting meeting Monroe. I was quite impressed with his demeanor, his helpfulness, his knowledge base. When I read the story of Lanai in a manuscript form, this was well before it was published, I read it with great interest because it tied the ancient days through the modern developments into the present. I've always valued that way of looking at things in the historical context, because you learn so much from where people have been.
That historical context was an important facet for Bob as he worked to update an extensive place names map of Lanai.
When they published the book, The Story of Lanai, R.M. Towell gave me the opportunity to create a map, and I worked with Kepa Mali and got the accurate spellings and all of the diacriticals and everything.
Bob's memory of Lanai and the plants there, I think it's a memory that is unique because it's not just focused on, you know, this is some biological name and this is who it is and what it is and where it comes from. His connection takes it to the Aina.
It was a wonderful experience doing that, and it took over a year of working not only with the correct names but then working with the map makers. So I've really enjoyed that, and that's something that makes me proud to have been a contributor to that. I started my career in forestry in the summer of 1965. I started on a Monday, and on a Thursday, Max Landgraf calls me into his office and in a heavy pidgin says, "Boy, Monday you go Kauai." And I went, "Oh, okay." I had no idea I was being stationed on Kauai, but that was fine with me. The forester on Kauai that I worked with was a man named Ralph Daler. He told me, "I want you to go out in the field and learn the land. I don't want to see you in the office that much." I wish things were like that throughout my whole career. One of the first projects that we were involved with that year was the opening up of the old Kalalau Trail. It was an old Hawaiian trail that was there prehistorically, but it was overgrown, hadn't been in use for a long time. It became very popular. In fact, it became too popular very quickly, and we got overrun, especially with new agers. I worked on Kauai for 6 years under Ralph Daler. I was transferred to Maui District, and when I got to Maui District, I worked under an old German guy named Karl Korte. He was a practical old man, and he told me a lot about the history of the forestry division in the early years, and a lot of the things that they used to do and what their focus was and what was important. Watersheds were important, and this same theory of eradicating these animals that were eating up the forest. These goats and sheep in particular that were all over the whole territory were considered to be vermin. They were animals that were just destroying the forests. So their mission was to fence them out and eradicate huge numbers of them. And that was the beginning, what it was like in the beginning of the Division of Forestry. The old timers, as I mentioned, knew the people that had just begun the Division of Forestry. So there was a chain of institutional knowledge when I started that went all the way back to the beginning. Ralph Hosmer and Charlie Judd, two of the early important foresters. Ralph Hosmer, who started the division, did a tremendous amount of work creating the forest reserve system and starting out the fencing and eradication work. And he was here in only 10 years, 1904 to 1914, but what he accomplished in those 10 years is really amazing. Created forest reserves on every island and made recommendations of management to many private landowners. A lot of respect for Ralph Hosmer.
When Bob was an assistant forester on Kauai, he would collect specimens and he would send them to Dr. Harold St. John.
I didn't know anything about collecting the fine details of collecting, so I had numbered my first set of collections 1 through 10. The second batch I sent in, I numbered 1 through whatever it was. And he wrote back to me very quickly and he says, "You need to start a numbering system that's consecutive. If you're ever going to be doing anything of value in botany, you need to keep notes and make your numbers consecutive." And I went, wow, I got told off, but I started doing that.
So Bob would send his specimens to St. John in the hopes that, you know, there might be new stuff there and St. John would be the person to describe them. And in many cases, this was true. Dr. St. John even decided to devote a journal series to plants that Bob Hobdy collected on Kauai. It's Bob Hobdy number 8. That means this is the 8th specimen that Bob Hobdy had collected in his lifetime up to that point. It's Bob Hobdy 184. In this case, as happens in several cases, only 1 specimen was made. We have, I think, about 2,800 plus voucher specimens collected by Bob over the years since probably the 60s. Over 40 of the specimens were considered by some taxonomists as a new entity, a new taxon of plant.
Over his career, Bob has discovered 14 new plant species, 5 of which have been named after him.
St. John described a bunch of things, some of which he named after me. The most recent one was Scaevola, a naupaka, that he named after me. And it was something I discovered on the slopes of Mount Eki in West Maui that was unlike any other Scaevola in Hawaii. When people first saw it, they didn't even dream it was a Scaevola. It was only known from a single plant in one spot. Luckily, I not only made a collection of it, of a small piece of it, but I also took pictures of it. There was another one, a Psychotria, which is a kopiko, that was from Kauai, that I collected in the Miloli'i area. And when I sent it in to Dr. St. John, the pressed specimen, the leaves that were green, turned kind of a reddish color when they dried. He named it Psychotria rosacea. It turned out that that name was already occupied by a specimen from somewhere else in the world. So when they came out with the Manual of Flowering Plants of Hawaii, Cy Somer, who was one of the authors of the manual, named it after me.
I think a lot of people in the Hawaiian conservation community are just so in awe of what Bob has accomplished in his lifetime. I know that he has affected many people, just as he was probably affected by the Degeners in his youth. So it's almost like an anointing, a passing on of the flame.
Bob and I did a joint, just Bob and I, on a trail between Puhi Valley and Honopu Valley on the island of Kauai, which describing it as a trail is a stretch. It was very, very narrow. It was a longer cliff. It was a sheer drop to the ocean on one side and a sheer cliff up above us. The idea was to walk from one valley to the other, and not along the coast, but about 150 feet up from the crashing surf. Bob just plunged ahead as if he was a goat. Here I was counting goats, and here was a goat man. I couldn't believe he was actually going to walk along that trail. Being a young biologist, I just followed him because he was kind of a senior man on this trip. And we did get from Avapuhi to Honopu'u safely. I'm not quite sure what we were doing because there were no goats on that trail. Even a goat wouldn't walk on that trail that Bob was on.
I remember one time on West Maui with Bob, he and I helicoptered into the back of Kauaula Valley. So we were exploring, but Bob forgot to bring his forestry radio. Don Shearer was going to pick us up with a helicopter, and so we weren't going to get picked up in the same place we got dropped off. So we went in the valley and we found some really interesting rare plants. When it came to be pickup time, we had no radio, and so there really was no place for a helicopter to really land for us. So we got up in this tree. I kind of cut a long pole. I made these long streamers that I tied to the pole, and I remember the helicopter kind of going up and down the valley a little bit looking for us. And I kind of remember Bob just kind of having this pole with all the flagging, just kind of slowly like waving like this. Sure enough, that was enough. The helicopter spotted us and could bring the skids right in, and we had to climb onto the skids out of this tree and climb up into the helicopter.
Bob is among that special breed of field botanists that has this intimate knowledge of the Hawaiian biota. There's only a select few of them in the state, really. He's been one of the, probably one of the top field people who've been out in Hawaiian environment that have been able to pick out these unique things that that botanists have agreed are probably different.
He really enjoyed his work. He was always smiling in the context of a field trip or a meeting. Very personable guy.
The approach that Bob has in his work is first and foremost rooted in his island connections. It's not something that he's studied from afar, it's something that he's lived. His own kupuna tended Queen Liliuokalani, you know? There's a connection there, and so the work that Bob does helps to breathe life of a living landscape and living culture, a landscape that is imbued with spirit.